I'm based in Canada. I'm in Calgary, right? So my name is Akinola Akinsipe, and let me give you a little background on myself, my career, and then we can open it up. The purpose of today is is for me to pass on whatever knowledge and exposure I have to you guys. So please make it interactive. Ask your questions as we go through this. Hopefully, I can advise you there as well. So what's my education? I moved to Canada in 2003. I schooled at McMaster University in Hamilton. So my intention there was to go in there and get an engineering degree. I ended up doing a double major. It's an engineering and business program. It was 5 years. I also had an opportunity in that time to do my internship with Research in Motion. So Research in Motion, they're the company that made BlackBerry. Back then, they were a big company. So I had an opportunity to work there and get some experience there. And then when I finished, not sure where my printer is going, but anyway, when I finished, um, it was tough. I finished in 2009. The industry was tough. We were going through a recession in Canada, and I wasn't a permanent resident. I was a student, and so going through that stretch, that was a really building stretch. I ended up doing some tutoring. I did a bunch of little things, and then I got a job in a consulting firm. Okay, and that consulting firm was doing solar panel designs. And I don't know if you've seen my bio, but I'm an electrical engineer. So I had an opportunity to do solar panel designs. Renewable was at the forefront. This was 2009. Things were new. Okay, and sometimes I think maybe I should have stayed in that path, right? Because it has continued to stay relevant. But nonetheless, I had an opportunity to start with Shell in 2011, and so I moved to Alberta. So that's when I moved from Ontario to Alberta. For those that know Canada, and what was I doing there? The first 2 years, I was doing a lot of plant maintenance, turnarounds, things like that, just to get my feet wet. They weren't, back then, a lot of people didn't want to go out to northern Canada where it was very cold, and I wanted the experience. So I went out there, did 2 years of that, did 2 years of project engineering, where I did plant and I did some mining projects. And I started with electrical, then I moved to multidisciplinary. And with the way the industry works, as you deliver, they give you more responsibilities. So I did that for another 2 years. So we're talking about 4 years now, and then I was tapped on the shoulder to lead the electrical design team. This was still in North Alberta, and so leading the electrical design team, that gave me a different exposure. I got to lead new graduates, fresh graduates out of school, but I also got to do design work. I got to work with engineering companies on what Shell wanted. And so that was a great experience for a year. And so that was 5 years I sat in the cold. And so I wanted to do something else. And so I made some fuss. Then I got an opportunity to actually do what I call real oil and gas stuff, because the first 5 years were mostly oil sands kind of experience. But got my feet in there, got me exposure. You got to network, and then I moved to Toronto, and that's where I really got some actual, gas and diesel experience. And I was the senior facility engineer there, so I was managing a couple assets in Ontario, and from an engineering standpoint, so asset integrity, capital planning, operational planning, maintenance, reliability, all that stuff. So I was providing the steer for that. And in that time, being there was good. My wife was doing her own program as well. So us being in Ontario was good for us family-wise at the time. And in that period as well, I mentioned I have an undergrad. I attained my MBA because I was always wanted to go into the business side of things once I'd gotten sufficient engineering experience. So I was able to do my MBA with Queens, but I was able to do it downtown Toronto. So I did it full time and I worked. And the most grueling year ever, but it was great experience. And right when I was done, the company recognized that I had this added education, and so they moved me to this new role. So 2020 January, so actually just last year, I started this role called Channel Optimizer, and the name doesn't tell you very much. If I just tell you Channel Optimizer, but really what I'm doing is I'm managing the downstream business for Eastern Canada. So Eastern Canada is kind of part of Ontario and then East. And and what is downstream for those that are new to oil and gas is, the oil and gas segment is broken up into three. There's upstream, so all your production, and I heard from the call a lot of people have, subsea experience, surface experience. Whenever you're kind of getting oil out of the ground, you're upstream. Then we have the midstream. Midstream is the pipeline, so moving that product from where you're actually getting out of the oil to where you're refining it. So that's the midstream experience. Typically, that's third party. If you're in Canada, those are the Enbridge, who else? Mostly Enbridge, but there are a few pipeline companies, Pembina, Interpipeline. So their job is movement of oil, right? So that's midstream. And then there's downstream. That's actually what is, I would say, booming right now. So downstream is the refined product. So we're refining it down. We're getting it to what we call terminals, right, where it's housed in tanks, and there's some optimizations there where if anybody's interested, I can talk to you around that. That's why they give that title, channel optimizer. But that's where you're making money, in terms of playing the market. And then there's the retail stations where it gets into people's cars. So all that makes downstream. And so what I do now is manage that section of the business for part of Canada. So there's three of us in Canada that do this. And so I help make all the decisions in terms of pricing, how we want to price our products, how we want to do exchange agreements, how we want to deal with third parties, which market we want to be in, how we want to compete, things like that. The other context I'll add is you can imagine, I mentioned retail stations, so fuel going into people's cars. That is all over the country. But you don't see, if I use Shell as an example, you don't see Shell refineries all over the country. You don't see Shell terminals all over the country. So how are we getting products into all these places? We're not sending products by pipeline everywhere. You're not going to make any money doing that. So you'll notice that there's different companies that are based in different places. And so you have exchange agreements. I'll give you product here, you give me product there, pricing terms, things like that. So that's been great. I've been doing that for a little over a year. I manage the business plan, things like that. So great exposure, a lot of work. The little hair I had has fallen off in this last 1 year, but it's been great exposure and experience. So that's kind of more about what my experience has been. My exposure has been, it's been good these last 10 years with Shell, but it's had its up and downs, and hopefully I can guide you through that. And the industry has gone through a lot of change in this time that I've been through here. The other thing I'll say before we get into maybe questions and things like that is what I'm giving you today is based on my experience and my exposure, right? So what I've gone through, the mentorship I've gotten, and other people will have different perspective on how they see this. So yeah, I think in terms of introduction, Tenny, I think that's good. That's a great question. When I worked at RIM, by the way, it was in Ottawa. So that's my claim to ever live in Ottawa. So chemical engineering is still relevant in the oil and gas industry. So that's a good thing. Maybe not to the same level of relevance it was maybe 20 years ago. Um, why I said the industry is changing is because if we had this chat last year, I would tell you that even in Ontario you can find stuff. Why would I have said that? Suncor is potentially the biggest oil and gas company in Canada, if I look at Canada specifically. And their head office was in Oakville, right? So, and they had their manufacturing plant there. And so I would say there's a lot of opportunities in that space. However, they've moved their head office to Calgary now. So that's changed the hub. There are refineries in Ontario. As you can imagine, Ontario is the biggest province, and so you still need to supply the market. So if you look at a place like Sarnia, Ontario, there's three refineries there: IOL, which is Imperial Oil, Exxon, Suncor, and Shell. So there are opportunities in that space. So I wouldn't say you necessarily have to move to make it happen. Why Alberta is preferred is because a lot of the companies, their head offices are there. And the head offices are there because they want to leverage the talent pool that is there, right? So blindly moving is not bad, but not necessarily a winning recipe. I would say you target it on all fronts. Don't wait till your master's is done to start your networking, to start your resume building, to start, getting your feet wet out there, attending conferences and things like that. I would start that now. And companies relocate you. I was in Hamilton, and then they relocated me to Alberta, right? So I didn't move first. Just nothing wrong with moving first, but it's not necessarily a guarantee. Now, I will add one more thing. If you intend to move, the advantage, however, is like I mentioned, the skill pool is there. So your likelihood to run into people that are already working in it is a little bit higher than Ontario, where the industry is so diverse, right? So there's so many different. And if you come to Alberta, likely you're going to run into an oil and gas person. That's the only reason why you would want to move. So I like that phrase near impossible because it doesn't mean it's impossible. It's harder, right? Um, it will be harder because one is there are people on ground that that are also looking for jobs, right? So, it's not like the industry has more supply than demand of jobs in terms of oil and gas. So it'll be a bit harder. But I would say, what I would say is, you have good experience. I mean, the masters in civil is good, and the project engineering experience you have, I think those are good. I also like the fact you have a side gig, by the way, and I think don't lose that thought process when you come here. I don't think it's impossible, but I will say, when you come here, leverage. There's something they have for new immigrants as well, where there's a platform Canada provides to you where it's free. It's free education essentially on how to position yourself, how to job hunt, things like that for a few months. So I would leverage that when I'm here while I'm looking. But I think likely you're going to get here first before you find something. But I think if you do all your prep work beforehand, it makes the process easier versus arriving blindly. Yeah, that's what I would say. I don't know too many people that found jobs before moving, unless it's a really, really unique kind of position. Mostly when they get here, they find, but it doesn't mean you get here and you wouldn't find. Karina. Okay. So that's a good question. So something, first of all, something I want to mention about the oil and gas industry, then I'll answer your question, is it attracts talent and skills from a wide variety. So, it's not like it's only chemical engineers, right? To run a plant, you need a chemical engineer, electrical engineer, you need reliability engineering, you need a finance team, you need a human professional team, you need economics. So, first thing is, be good at something, right? So, what is your technical competence, and how can you prove that I'm technically competent in this? Because they'll need it. I'm an electrical engineer, I'm not doing power, right? So, to run a plant, to run a project, to run anything, you need wide variety of skills. So, you mentioned geomatics. So you have geologists that are there. You have people that study physics. You have all kinds of people. I know all kinds of research and development, everything, health, like, so everything is in it. So that's the first thing I want to lay out there, that everybody on this call, your skill set is in the industry. Period. Like, everyone and everything you said, your skill set in the industry. So that's the first disclaimer. Now, to answer your question on sizable projects that are going on, I'll break it in two from my vantage point. So there's the regular running, projects to keep you running, right? So maintain projects. So if I pick two big companies, maybe I'll add a third one, but if I look at Canada Natural Resources Limited, so CNRL, and if I look at Suncor, those are the large players here, and they're heavily invested in the oil sands business. They're not going away from that anytime soon. They have a lot of assets in that, and they intend to continue to get the most out of those facilities. So with that, there'll always be projects. There'll always be reliability efforts. There'll always be optimizations, debottlenecking, things like that. So there'll always be those projects. Now, if you're looking for large-scale, grandiose, unique type projects, in Canada right now, the two efforts are, and they're kind of tied together, but there's LNG, right? I don't know how much you know about liquefied nitrogen gas, but if you look at, and most of them are based in BC, and they're based in BC because of the access to the water, right? Canada's production right now, what Canada's efforts is on right now is, how can we be an exporter of our energy? So if you position yourself in places like BC, you can access Asia, right? So that's the intent. So if you get into LNG projects, those are large ones, because they have two streams. There's the actual liquefied nitrogen process project, but there's the gas project, because you need gas to make it happen. So there's all the onshore gas projects, mostly around BC and Alberta. That's where those are. So you're not going to find those in Ontario, right? So those are going to be in BC and Alberta. And sometimes in BC, it's in places nobody wants to go. The Canadians don't want to go to. So this is where we come in, right? So you go in there, you get your experience, you make your money. More importantly, you make your experience. Like I tell people, the 5 years I was in North Alberta, I got 12 years worth of experience. Like, the things I know and I've done, a lot of people that I work in head office have not seen. So leverage that. So that's what I would say for big projects. It's either you're doing a maintain project, so target some of the big companies that are here to stay, or you're looking for LNG type projects. And then the second type of projects I'll mention are renewable effort type projects. Right, there's a lot of emphasis these days on renewable projects. There's the Paris Agreement, so that's where things like biofuels come in, electric vehicle charging stations come in. So there's a lot of projects in that space as well. And when you hear electric vehicle charging, the people who I know are in the projects, they're not electrical engineers. That's not the concept, right? It's, the concept of electrical vehicle is simple. It's just, can you execute it effectively? Can you prove you've done projects? Are you willing to travel? Like, those are the other elements that then come into play in determining who's going to do that job. So first thing, I noted that you're based in Brampton and you have reliability engineering exposure. Um, so when I was in Ontario, that's what I did. Well, I managed the reliability engineering team, right? So um, I would say that's a great entry point. The reason I say that is because, the assets are there. You need reliability, right? So for you, if you're coming in as an experienced hire, that's where you're coming in. And I found we struggled with finding people that had reliability willingness, like the willingness to be a reliability engineer. So that's what I would say first of all for you is target reliability in all aspects. It could be pipeline, it could be tank maintenance. So get to know if you want to stay in Ontario, in Brampton, for example. Ontario is the largest market for oil, right, in terms of people driving vehicles. So there's a lot of terminals, right? So terminals means tank maintenance, pipe maintenance, pump maintenance, things like that, reliability programs. Get familiar with the newest tools, right, that are being used to manage reliability, be it MTA or whatever the tools are that are available. Be familiar with it so that if you're sitting in an interview, because there are jobs out there for a reliability engineer, you're showing that you have a grasp on the tools, you have a grasp on the nature of the assets they have there, and then you can put together an RCM, so things like that. And if you want to chat at some point, I can give you some pointers as well. But I'll say that's your entry in because I found that that particular skill is lacking because everybody wants the flashy project engineer, but the reliability is kind of key to make sure you have an asset that can continue to make money for you. So I would target that. That's the first part of that question. The second part around the faith in the industry. If you ask me personally, 5 years ago, when they used to, because they would ask, where do you see yourself, and I would plot a career map, for the next 20 years. I had some, I was on a call last week and they asked me, and I can only tell you about this year. I have no faith past this year. I'm just being very transparent. Not because the industry is going away this year, right? You're not going to suddenly turn around and everyone's going to be driving electric vehicles. And no. So I think at least till 2040, we're okay. But it's in decline. It's not growing. It has gone through its growth. It has matured. It's in decline. So really the entry point now are people who are exiting. As people exit, people enter. That's really it. And then the new projects we talked about, LNG and so on. So I wouldn't say the faith is high, especially you being in Ontario. No one's going to talk about oil and gas. If you're in Alberta, people feel differently about oil and gas, so it's province based. But the opportunities are still there. What I want to advise people on the call, and that's the mindset shift I've had, is don't look at the industry in terms of oil and gas specifically. I would focus on being part of the energy industry. And why I say that is, why was oil and gas put in there in the first place? It wasn't just to bring oil and move it. It's because it was to create energy, either in your vehicles, in the house, heating, whatever the case may be. That was the intention. Now, the source of the energy need is still there. If anything, is growing, with population growth and things like that. But now the source of that energy is going to change with the future. And so I would want you, especially those that are newer in their career, right? Position yourself so that you understand the energy industry, right? So be it biofuels, right? Oil is still there, but there's going to be, if you think about it, if I have to add more ethanol or more biofuels, it means I'm making less of the actual product, right? But are you positioned to be in the biofuels industry, right? Are you positioned to be in the ethanol industry? Are you positioned to be in the EV industry? Are you positioned, and EV means solar panels, wind industry. Wind has been there a while, but it's been flat, right? So now it's picking up, and it was flat because it was inefficient. So people are figuring out how to make it more efficient. So just have that mindset that I'm in the energy industry, right? Whatever it takes to make energy, I'm in it. And then once you sit into conversations, know your oil and gas, but also know where it's going. These large multinational companies, and I'm speaking from experience because I'm in these conversations often, we're figuring out how do we transition with all these regulations, the change in mindset, because a lot of it is there's also perception people have, right? Where, okay, even though you're an oil and gas company, are you doing environmentally friendly things? Then people want to buy your products, and so people are focusing on that. But what I'll say is just have that mindset. The oil and gas industry is not necessarily going away, but they're adopting. So now there's more focus on chemicals because the batteries need chemicals. There's more focus on EV. There's more focus on renewables. So that's what I would say. But in terms of just conventional, drill the ground, get oil out, that's not going to be there very long, right? If you notice, it's the smaller companies now that are picking up the drilling. The bigger companies are moving away from it. They're doing something different. So I was looking at as a side thing, I was looking at our financials for last year, and a lot of the money we generated wasn't from drilling oil on the ground. It was from trading, right? So at the end of the day, yes, they're oil and gas companies, but they're positioning themselves to the energy, and I would like you to position your mindset the same way. Because you're mechanical engineer and you've done some support engineering work. So when you were talking, I made note of two things. The environmental sector is still very big, be it oil and gas or otherwise. And you're just talking to some of my friends that are in the environmental engineering. So as perception changes, before companies could produce, spill their oil, whatever they want to do, people didn't care as much. People care more now. So you can't do a lot of projects, you can't do a lot of maintenance activity without your environmental folks, your environmental engineering folks. And they're focused on, how do we manage spills? How do we contain things? How do we so I would say if you want to go into environmental engineering, there's still room for that, right? If you want to also go into your support engineering, there's the pipeline industries, right? So if I look at TransCanada is probably the one that is still doing projects and growing in Canada, right? So they will have a lot of support type, reliability, environmental, pipeline engineers. So I'll say those are avenues to go in, especially if you want to go in as an experienced hire, right? So I'll look out for that. I am familiar with the financial industry. Now, there are two aspects. There is finance in oil and gas, right, which I have exposure to because of the nature of my current job. That's not growing, right? That's reducing. You mentioned you have investment brokerage type experience, right, where you advise people about investments and stuff. That's a great industry. In terms of, especially if you're in Toronto or one of those, they work you hard, but that's a great industry because there's always going to be capital need. There's always going to be new companies being that come up and require capital management or capital access and things like that. If I was in your shoes with finance exposure, experience, investment, not that there's anything wrong with oil and gas, but I'll be targeting mainstream, the Bay Street of Toronto, and seeing how I can get in there and get my exposure and my experience there. That's just, and while you're there, you might be managing capital on oil and gas projects, but you don't have to be in the oil and gas company to make that happen, right? You can still get that exposure. That would be my experience, just so you come in, and that's a bit unique. Most people don't come in that I know of fresh off the press in terms of coming from Nigeria and then going to that industry. Typically, they like oil and gas or manufacturing. When you were talking, I just wrote, stay with investments. Don't. I'm trying to get into that, so that's my side thing. So that one I have more faith in long term. In my head, I have a very long answer, so I'm going to try to be succinct. So um, the way Canada runs, there's federal, right? So there's federal regulations, so national type regulations. They're based in Ottawa, okay? Then there's provincial, so each province has their own regulations. So um, unless you put your headquarters in every province, you won't be close to regulators. Now, the reason why I mentioned where a lot of headquarters for oil and gas companies are in Alberta is talent management, right? The guy who leads Suncor, you want him in your company. The guy who leads Transcat. So similar to how the banking are downtown Toronto. So that's from a talent management. Now, if you look at the industry, Canada is very wide. It's only 33 million people, but it's very wide. Um, you know, so if I'm an oil company and I have my refinery somewhere, I can't feasibly have pipelines and stuff going all over. First of all, the provinces won't even allow it. And so this is where I have to work with third parties, right? So, if I look at a company called Co-op, they have their refinery in Saskatchewan, while Shell has theirs in Edmonton. Now, if I want to get business in Saskatchewan, I'm not going to start moving all my products. It's not financially smart. Co-op's not going to do the same in Alberta. So that's where all these exchange agreements come in, and that's a large part of my job. Is okay, I'll give you here, you give me there, and so you'll see that across the whole country, and that's really how they make products move around. And a very big part of my job is pricing management, right? How do we price our businesses across to make sure that even though you're giving me product in Saskatchewan, the value of that product is not as high as in Alberta, for example. And so how do we manage the pricing? But there is a lot of third-party exchange agreements. There are a few pipelines. So there's Enbridge that goes across that helps move some products from province to province. And then there's rail, so if I look at the train rail, so that's another major way that they move products across. But you don't do that for the large part of your business. It's small parts. Otherwise, you're not going to make a lot of money. So, and then there's also imports, there's exports, on the coastal lines for products coming out. Um, I think I know too much about it, so I don't want to go into too much detail and take up the time. But if you had more specific questions around how we do that, but that's really how it happens. Is I have my headquarter, I have one or two refineries at most, then I have some terminals, I have retail stations, but then I bank on a lot of exchange agreements with other people to allow my products move around. That's a good question. I don't have specific company names, right? Because what I'm seeing up here is there are these small companies that are coming up, right? Actually, one of my friends also started one that are either focused on, either solar panel installation. No one is making solar panels in Canada because Asia is already there. You're not going to beat the price, so no one is big. So there's either solar panels, and then there's people doing bio projects, like in Quebec. Recently, there was a project announced. I forget the name of the company, but so they started their own bio. And so what large companies are doing is they're partnering with them, they're buying them out, whatever the case may be. If I had capital last year, I would go start one of those and hope somebody buys it out, right, and then sit back. But I would say I don't think there's a specific big player. Like the big companies are now the big players, so the Shells, actually Shell mostly in Canada, and then the others are coming, right? And what they're doing is who has already started the work, let's partner with them or buy them out. But big thing right now is in Canada, we have what we call the Canada Federal Regulation, so CFS, and it's more stringent in different. Like BC is very strict on how much bioproducts, and then when you start thinking of bioproducts, you start talking about carbon intensity, low carbon intensity. So there's a lot of regulations there that make the prices of oil in BC more expensive than say in Alberta, where the regulations are not as much. And so it varies from province to province. I would really advise gathering knowledge on the renewable business in Canada, like not necessarily the companies, but what the government is doing, right? In each province, like what's the government doing? What is their plan? Like 2023, there's some big changes coming. What are their plans? What are they trying to do? Because a lot of companies now are figuring out how can we comply. So imagine sitting in an interview and you have knowledge of what the Canada federal regulation is doing, what some provinces are doing, the compliance you need, how much bioproducts you need to put into products, what the carbon intensity meter is, what kind of ethanol blend is being needed, what they're thinking to do on premium products. So there's a lot that goes into it that if you sit in an interview and you know this, I find out what companies, if I look at Shell, we're hiring externally because people in the oil and gas industry have been there the last 20, 30 years. This wasn't there. They're not going to suddenly just know it. So people who are coming in now is like, okay, we're bringing in talent of people who know what we don't know. And so all this information is very readily available. It's very dry. It's not fun. But it's important, right? If I want to stay in business, this is what I need to do. And so you have to always realize that while you are trying to grow your career, you're trying to make money and things like that, these companies are in business to solve an issue to make them money. So how can I position myself to be a solution provider to an issue they have that will enable them make money or enable them stay out of trouble? Because you stay out of trouble means you're not spending money, you're keeping money. How can I position myself to be that way? And there's a lot that goes into it. It's very complicated. But I think if you can dissect that and have a semblance of it, um, you'll be better positioned than somebody else. So let's tackle that question. So firstly, your first part was around new grads. So if I look at skill pool management, right? So there's two parts. There's new grads and then there's experience hire. If you're a new grad, they don't hire you because you're technically competent in something. They hire you on a prospect, right? So that's where, like, when I joined Shell, I joined new grad because I had only worked 2 years. So they hired me based on they saw potential leadership skills. That's really what they hired on, right? And the interview process is very geared to that. Nothing in my interview asked me about my electrical engineering experience, but I had to go do electrical engineering. So that's not the focus. Then there's experience hire where they hire you because you have a technical competence that they need. Okay, so right now there's a higher chance to get a job based on your technical competence that they need because the need they have versus a prospect in an industry they're not sure where they're going. Okay, so have that at the back of your mind. 3 4 years experience, nothing wrong with that. And then with your, I think you had the surface facility kind of management experience, and you're working masters chem eng, right? So you're you're still well positioned in that space in terms of finding a job. It's just that you'll be looking for a gap a company has, so an advertised role, and you're positioning yourself. The second part of your question around the professional engineering and things like that. You're right, it is by province. So I have mine in Ontario and Alberta, and I have it that way because I worked in those two places. Now it was much easier for me to get it than it will be for you, because I schooled here, right, and I'd worked here, and so it was quick. Now for you, regardless of whether you do when you come here or not, it doesn't make a difference. Once you're a permanent resident, if you already are, submit your application, okay? Because you're going to have to write an exam, right? Which I didn't have to write, right? Which is not a fun exam. Fundamentals of engineering. You're going to have to write that exam to get all that accreditation. Now, where that license will help you is not necessarily in the large oil and gas companies. They don't care too much if you're a PN. It's nice, but they don't care because they're not the ones stamping drawings and things like that. They outsource that to EPCs, so engineering, procurement, contracting companies. So if you're going to work in one of those, which I will talk about that if there's time after, then yes, it will be advantageous to have it, or at least be able to indicate that the process is en route, right? You've submitted your application, you've done the necessary exam, or you've applied for the exams. Then companies they can still hire you knowing that that's coming, right? And for some of those companies, your pay scale will be different whether you have it or not, right? And so you can always start with that and then add it. But I would say the minute you're able to submit it, get it going, especially if you want to be an experienced hire, it's good to have. You will have to do fundamentals of something engineering to get it done. Every province is different. Alberta is a little bit easier to get it than Ontario, just FYI. And yeah. If you notice, or if you recall, when I talked about midstream, I said they're not going anywhere. So I call them enduringly profitable. They'll always be in business. As long as there's product to move, they'll always be in business. So people who join those, they always have a job. So it might not be bad to still join those. That's what I'll say, because you have experience, right? The question that Anissa asked me then was different in terms of the nature of what she wants to do. Midstream won't be as exciting, right? So I would say for you, it should still be top of mind. I have exposure, I have experience, I have interest. Now, transitioning to downstream is not a big deal. Downstream is a bit more complicated because it's more than just pipelines. But there's still pipelines. There's still, at that point, it's piping, as they call it, but it's smaller piping. So your experience there is still translatable. I don't think you need to go and acquire anything new to make that happen. You just have to learn a bit more because there's tighter regulations. A lot of it is closer to where people live and stuff. So there's a lot more government eyes on it and things like that. But that's really where the difference is. So I don't think there's anything specifically you'll have to go learn, Karina, to make it happen. It's just more whether the opportunity is there. The second part of your question around money, it's hard for me to say because one is I haven't looked recently, to be honest with you. I've talked to people who have told me, okay, well, I'm getting a job. This is what they offer me. What do you think? This is what I would say, right? Now, at the time I joined in upstream. Upstream was where the money was. So the way they paid then, I don't know if they still pay that way. Now, downstream has traditionally been very miserly, and it has always been that way because it used to be a very tight margin business. So even though the margins have grown, they haven't started throwing salaries around. Okay, so that's what I'll say. Now, entry point into an oil and gas industry, the money is higher than if I entered into an engineering service provider because I had the margins to pay. But now what's happening is because I don't want to start cutting jobs and there's oil price is not where it is, I'm hiring less people. Okay. So I would say with your experience, and I think you had let me see what I wrote. I think you had 3 years. Yeah. So I would say if you join an engineering service provider, if it's also province-based, it's very hard to answer actually. You're not going to be poor. I don't know if I can, but you'll do well. What I will advise, especially being a lady and being black, is I find a lot of times you end up taking lower salaries because you don't negotiate, right? I only have brothers, but my wife has a lot of sisters, so I say I have sisters, and I find I have to advise them that way to be more aggressive in terms of pursuing the salary. So when a company offers you something, you ask for more. Like if they've already gone through the stage of saying they want to hire you, they're not going to say, oh, because you asked for more money, we're going to send you away. No, they're going to negotiate. That's what negotiation is. So don't be afraid to ask for more. Yeah, when I joined in 2009, I don't even know. I don't know how to answer that question because my salary changed so much. I just know oil and gas pays more than other companies. Investment banking for a player that wants to go in is where you can really make a lot of money as well if you work well. So Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have a direct answer for you, Karina. Okay, so that's an interesting question. I think experience is always very important. So having experience and being able to demonstrate competence is key. Showing you've worked in an international oil and gas company is nice. If you want to stay with an international oil and gas company, it's nice. It could give you an edge within that company. To another company, it could not. I think at the end of the day, it depends on the experience you're able to communicate that you have. I think that's where it becomes very important in that space. But being able to demonstrate you have experience key. I've seen some people come from Nigeria get jobs right away. I've seen some people, that schooled here and didn't. So at the end of the day, it's how people position themselves, how relevant what they're doing is to what the company needs. What I'll do is I'll answer your question with quickly as I can. But so how did I get my first job? I was out of school. The economy was down. You know, the name Akinola Akinsipe doesn't necessarily jump out as okay. Is this somebody that we want to work with? Okay, on the resume. So I had to be very aggressive. Now COVID presents some other challenges that are not there. But I remember my first job. It was a consulting firm in Ontario, and man, I was at a networking event. I heard about the company. I just started targeting them. You know, emails because I finally got an email of somebody. Their email calls. I offered to work for free. Like there was nothing I didn't do. So at some point they said, okay, you know what? Just come and interview. So I interviewed. I thought it went well. I didn't hear from them again. So I started like calling them, calling, email, call, email, call. I'm not exaggerating. That's what I did. So one day I called. They said the guy was in the office, but was in a meeting. I said, "Oh, so he's in the office." He said, "Yeah, and it's 20 minutes from my house." So I just drove. I just drove there. And then the receptionist happened not to be there. So I walked and I went into the guy's office and I waited for him. And then he finished his meeting and came and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I thought our interview went well and I haven't heard from you in weeks." And then he told me, "Okay, you know what?" And I told him, "I'm willing to come here and work for free because I want to add value." That was the word I was always thrown in there. I want to add value. And they said, "Okay, you know what? Come and start, but we'll pay you and we'll put you as a contractor." And then I started as a contractor, very low paying, but I wanted to be in there. And 3 weeks later, the guy got fired. And then they brought in a new manager. And this new manager said, "Oh, why are we paying this guy so little?" So they made me a staff, up to my pay and all that. But the first day I sat in that job, the guy told me, "Your perseverance is why you're here." And I got there and I was super busy. So there was work to be done. So I couldn't understand, so companies are funny in the way where there's work to be done, but they want to see how long they can go without bringing anybody in. So that's just a little preface. But what I would say is once you've done all the resume stuff, make sure all the buzzwords in your resume and all that, you'll need to be aggressive, right? Now, LinkedIn, what's the word? COVID has provided some additional challenges for networking. LinkedIn is still a good avenue, but you'll have to bug people, right? Because at the end of the day, is your career, is your finance, is something you want. You're gonna have to bug them to get in. That's what worked for me. And then I find once you're in, then all of a sudden these other jobs start surfacing. Then I had 3 job interviews a month later, because then all of a sudden you're interesting. Somebody else has taken the risk on you. So there are a few other things I'll add to that is that may help the larger group where um, you know don't be afraid to be a contractor as well. Where what's a contractor? A contractor is a hired gun a company has. Where I'm my own person, right? I'm coming as a technical person, either a project engineer, whatever the case may be, but I'm not a direct staff of the company, right? But I'm my own company. I still have the experience. I still work with you. That way, it's low risk for the company. They don't have to take on all the benefits, blah 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 blah. But you get the experience you want out of it. You actually get paid well. It teaches you about money management because you have to manage your own taxes and things like that. But don't be afraid to going through that route as well, where you come in and say, "I'm my own person," or you're going through a headhunting service like Kelly Services or whatever. Ultimately, you want that name you want the name of the company associated with your experience, and then things will take off. But there is going to be that bias. Even me, 12 years of working, there's still a bias where if you're not familiar with me and I walk in and you see, oh, just a black person, you have to always overcome that bias. So I find myself having to always do a bit extra. And I chose to be in Canada. I'm not in Nigeria, so it comes with the territory, right? So it'll always be there. Hey, hey, you know something? You don't have the hardest name, so you're not the Akinola Akinsipe club, right? So you're okay, right? So what I will say is Canada's bias is super low key. If you think UK is low key, Canada is low key, but the bias is there. Um, you know, I've heard stories of what HR people do and all that, but I think all this Black Lives Matter movement has started to open people's eyes. I've been in a lot of conversations where people are starting to be aware of some of their unconscious biases because it's not intentional. And so, if you have a middle name, that's fine. But I never changed my name, and I've been okay. So, I think at the end of the day is when it comes down to it, if you can, especially if you're an experienced hire, if you can demonstrate that you have a competence that a company needs to fill, they're going to bring you in, right? Now, make sure your resume is good. Do all the networking you can. Figure out a way to get your foot in the interview room. Then it's fine, because even if I show up there, my name is David something, and I get there and I don't know how to communicate, I can't display that I have technical competence on. It's going to end there anyway. So I say that's where your focus needs to be, is being able to demonstrate that I have a competence, you have a gap, and I can help you close that gap. So, but we chose to leave Nigeria. So if I was in Nigeria, I wouldn't be thinking of whether somebody thinks my name is good or bad. I'm here, so it comes with that. It just means I have to put in a little bit of extra effort to enjoy the benefits of being here. Okay, I wanted to say a few things very quickly. So one is, getting into the oil and gas industry, and like I said, let's call it the energy industry. It's very exciting. Don't be afraid if you haven't worked in it before. If you're interested in coming in, it has a wide array of competencies that are needed, from HR to finance to economics to marketing, and then to your engineering and maintenance and reliability. So there's a whole variety. So don't be afraid to get in there and do that. As long as you can demonstrate you have an interest, you're forward thinking in terms of your research and your positioning, and that you can demonstrate I have a particular technical competence. So don't be afraid of that. Understand the tools needed in your current job that are prevalent in that particular industry. Know the tools, right? So you can demonstrate that. Attend industry networking events. Now, don't use COVID as an excuse. There's a lot of virtual events, okay? So figure out on LinkedIn what's going on, attend those events, let people see your name, you get to see people's names, you can figure out people's email addresses from their names, get what you want out of this. And remember, companies have issues that they're trying to solve to help them make money. That's why they hire you. It's not a charity event. And so you're there to help them close an issue they have, demonstrate that you can do that, and you should be fine. And then I talked about EPCs, so engineering service provider companies. That's another way to get in there, get some experience, especially if you're a newer grad. Get in there, get some experience, and then exposure, because a lot of people who I know from there get into oil and gas industries because you're working with them all the time. And so you're almost interviewing while you're with the other company for those companies. And I would say, don't be afraid to be a contractor. Don't be afraid to go out there and be a self person that is working on a company. But at the end of the day, the company isn't carrying the risk of hiring you, but you're getting the benefit of being associated with the company name. And I'll say this. I'll say these two things lastly. Mentorship is very, very important. So identify mentors in that industry that can help you, of different age gaps. So don't necessarily go find people that are about to retire. Also find some up and comers, get some mentorship. After you start working, still maintain mentorship, because that's what will help you. And leverage LinkedIn. LinkedIn has really changed from when it started. Everyone has 500 plus networks. Figure out who you want to connect with, talk to people, use LinkedIn Learning where you can. Just leverage it, and just don't be afraid of coming in here. Like Canada is great. It's cold, but it's great. There's opportunities here, and I'm sure with the right mindset, you'll succeed.